Or I guess I'll pick on Jay because he's the first one.
All right, sounds good. Hi, everyone. I'm Jai Chadha. I am a first year at Yale University, prospectively majoring in computer science and economics. I guess I'll pass it off to Rachel.
Hi guys, I'm Rachel. I'm a sophomore studying biology and minoring in philosophy. I am tentatively a pre-med, so hopefully that works out well. And I graduated from Minnetonka in 2019. Yeah, and then I'll pass it to Amy.
Hi, I'm a freshman at Northwestern University thinking of majoring in computer science and biology. I graduated from Edina High School in 2020. And I will pass it to Joy.
Hello, my name is Joy Tang. I'm a freshman at the University of Michigan, and I am planning to major in economics. And I'll pass it on to Sophie.
Hi, I'm Sophie. I'm a freshman at Columbia University. I plan on majoring in political science with a minor in business management, and I also graduated from Minnetonka High School just last year.
Okay, nice. So now we're just gonna go into like two main sections for the pre-written questions that we already have available. So we're going to spend time talking about the application process and also college life throughout the entire panel. So Brittany, maybe you want to start us off with the first question we have from our audience.
So how many colleges should I apply to, and how important are college visits and tours?
I can start off, I guess. I think there's like no definite answer to that question. Obviously, I think everyone will agree with me that the more you apply to, the better, just because, but also at the same time, like you have to really think about and like don't just like blindly apply to a lot of colleges and then spend like mediocre effort on all of your applications. Like really focus on like the few applications you really think are important. And that's my thought on that. I think college visits are also pretty important, but if anyone else wants to jump in here.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Joy said. I unfortunately sort of made the mistake in high school to apply to like a ton of schools. I actually applied to, I think, 19 different schools. And obviously, like, I didn't care that much about a lot of them, but I just wanted to like, spread a wide net. So I think that really made my experience kind of miserable. Personally, I would cap it honestly at 15 because, like Joy said, you really want to be able to put in a lot of effort and thought into your applications. And the thing is, admissions officers can really tell if you care about the school or not. So you just want to make sure you're not like, burning yourself out.
To add on to that, I think that you should also consider that each college costs money to apply to. So be aware of other factors, and also you are important. Remember to keep track of how much energy you have. Don't blindly funnel your energy into a million different college applications. And I think it's kind of risky to say now, or like looking back, only one college acceptance really matters. So with the advice other panelists have given, I would agree to definitely focus your energy on the colleges that really matter to you. Because if you get in, that's where you will go to, not the schools that you apply just to apply to.
I'll chime in really quickly, touching on my fellow panelists. I wholeheartedly agree that you should really care and put the enough effort into each application that you're submitting. I also think when you're doing that, you should take kind of a methodical approach to how you apply, because you don't want to necessarily just apply to the schools that might have a very low acceptance rate. You want to have kind of what they call a tiered list, sort of reach, meet, and safety schools. So when you're considering which applications you're putting enough effort into, you want to also consider having that varied approach, just in case. And also touching on visiting schools, I'm not quite sure how much visiting schools can do to affect the status of your application, but I think it can really affect how you feel about the school and whether or not you actually want to apply there.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the next questions we had about applications was talking about should I apply early? And maybe panelists can kind of talk about the differences maybe between like early action, early decision, or like single choice, early action, all of that terminology there.
I can start off. So basically just like a quick rundown are like the two main ones you'll see are EA and ED, so early action and then early decision, right? So early action typically is not binding, which means that even if you get into a school early action, you don't have to go. Whereas early decision, if you do get in, you are bound to go. And so that's how I applied to Columbia. Actually, I applied early decision in around November, December. And then there are like, there are three things can happen afterwards. You get accepted or denied, or you can get deferred, which means that, they can't make a decision right. Like, at the end of the year, they'll push you into the main application pool. And so I think the main thing you want to consider when you're choosing whether to apply early or not is how committed you are to like that school. Because especially if it's ED, if you apply ED and you're like kind of like meh about the school, you will, if you get in, like you have to go. So there's really no going back. And also financial aid is a big thing to consider if you want to apply early. So some schools may not give you your financial aid package until later. So you want to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think to go off of what Sophie was saying, specifically with early decision, I think it's really important to consider that you want to go to the school before you apply. Early decision is going to increase your chances of getting accepted because the decision is binding at the end. So the school makes its decisions for who their class is going to comprise of those people in early decision, and they know the decision is binding. So I would suggest early decision for students who know what they kind of want to do and know what their, sorry, I apologize for that noise. They kind of know what their specialty is and what the school specializes in also. So for example, like some schools have really great engineering programs, right? And you want to be an engineer and you have a lot of background in that, and like your resume has a lot of that in it, and you want to go to that school, then I think early decision would be more appropriate for you versus I want to be accepted into the school, and I know that early decision has a higher chance of doing that, just because, yeah, the decision is binding. And then early action is different because it's not necessarily binding, but it's also, you have to keep in mind that single choice, like you can only apply to one school at a time in that case. So yeah, it really depends on the individual, but yeah.
Something I would like to add is that aside from the general like early decision, early action, you have to remember that there's also a lot of public schools that you can also apply to at the same time. For instance, University of Michigan. So I actually, so like you can actually apply to a lot of these kind of schools early, like really early on. Like for the people who live in Minnesota, for instance, the University of Minnesota accepts applications like really, really early. So like people are sending in their applications and at like September and stuff. And especially if you want to reach higher or something and you're still not really sure like how well, like how much, like what kind of college you can get into. I think it's a really good idea to apply really early to a lot of these public schools, since there's like you can apply to basically as many as you want and the decisions come back pretty fast. So you can always remember to apply to those along with your EA, ED schools, because I think that's a good idea also.
I'll also chime in really quickly and just note that a lot of these schools can have different kind of combinations of EA versus ED. For example, U Chicago has an ED1 and an ED2. So reading into schools that you might be interested in and seeing what their specific rules are is a really good idea. Another example is that if you're applying to a school in the University of California system, whichever school, they only have a single deadline, which is November 30th, I believe. So it's in between what you would expect, that early action, which is typically November 1st, and the regular action, which is typically around January 1st. So just making sure that there's not a special circumstance for schools that you might be considering.
Okay, moving on to our next question. What were your stats and extracurriculars like, and how can I stand out from other applicants?
You know what? I'll start off. I think okay, I'm going to start off and preface this answer by saying that stats are important, but they're by no means the only thing to consider when applying. Okay. Now, I understand that's really hard to hear from an applicant's or future applicant's perspective, because I went through that as well. But I want to make sure that that piece of advice and that statement is heard by everyone, because I think it's really important. And looking back on the process, it might be even more important now, considering that a lot of schools have gone test optional. That being said, my specific stats, I took the ACT. Are we giving the exact, I guess, are we just giving the exact number?
Well, whatever you're comfortable with, I guess.
Okay. All right, I got a 36 on my ACT. Beyond that, extracurriculars, things that I pursued in high school, were of interest to me. I participated in the debate team. I did DECA in high school. I did quite a bit of volunteering through this organization called Backpack Tutoring, where I tutored elementary school kids. I did a few other activities, but I think what's most important and what ties all of them together is that there were things that I actually wanted to do, rather things that I just did because I thought they might look good on an application or on a resume. So that's where I would probably say how to focus what you're doing in terms of extracurricular standpoint.
To add on to what Jay just said, your college application is kind of like a story, a narrative that you're presenting about yourself to the college admissions committee. So you want to make sure that your activities all kind of follow one narrative or multiple narratives of what you're interested in. And that's how you stand out in front of every single other qualified person applying to whatever school you're applying to. Because what really matters is that you're passionate about something and you show evidence that you're doing things that work towards what you're passionate about, that you're making an impact in your community. And I think that matters more than test scores, to be honest. I think that test scores and GPA are kind of like a threshold thing that colleges look at to make sure that you're academically ready to succeed at your college, but they are more interested in the person that you are and the passions you bring to your campus.
I think some practical advice I could give with like how to stand out from other applicants, like kind of what Amy was saying, like as a baseline, a lot of the applicants have like pretty high stats, right? Like SAT, ACTs, AP exams. But the way you're going to stand out, and I think from what I've heard from other people I go to college with, is just that they kind of picked one thing and just went with it. And I know that's difficult because like sometimes in high school, you don't really know what you're passionate about right away. There are plenty of people I've met who don't know what they're doing now and they're like juniors in college, and that's totally fine. But if you find something that you're genuinely interested in, then kind of explore ways to like branch out in that. So like for me, I did basically just debate all 4 years of high school. And like on a resume, that's like one block of thing, but I put a lot of hours into it and I tried to find, I did different formats of debate, and I also really worked on leadership. So like considering, did you leave an organization or a club or an activity better than the way you found it, right? Did you contribute to the foundations of that club and making opportunities and advancements for people who are going to come after you? That's something that is important, making a lasting impact in your school or in your community. And so, yeah, instead of trying to like I think there's a balance, right? You don't want to do a bunch of different things just so that you can put it on your resume. But at the same time, if you have like a random interest that doesn't really fit into some like grand thing, like maybe you just want to play the oboe, or like, I don't know, you want to just do something, like do it. And then in your application, just discuss how that contributed to you as a person. Like, how did that shape your values or shape your study habits, or yeah, any of those things. So yeah, at the end of the day, do what you're interested in, but also if you want to stand out, consider going deeper into the things that you're already interested in.
Yeah, I just want to quickly add on. I think Amy and Rachel literally said it perfectly. But what I would have to add to is that like a lot of college counselors, they also talk about this thing called a spike, which is essentially what Rachel mentioned. It's like, it's your one sort of like shtick that you have, that one sort of thing that you're really interested in, or that you like kind of, you might want to pursue later on in college. And I found that to be pretty important when I was applying to schools. Because I mean, I knew pretty early on that I wanted to do like political science on a sort of pre-law track. So essentially what I did in high school was I tried to take that interest beyond just the sort of high school community and try to like get some real life experience. So what I did is I did like an internship at the district attorney's office in San Francisco. I spent some time sort of, you know, volunteering for like lawyers and like doing stuff for them. And then also like just within the school too, I also wrote for the school newspaper. I was the editor in chief for a year, and a lot of my like pieces were sort of surrounding like social justice issues and sort of political issues. And I think I submitted a couple of those on some of my college applications too. So I think Amy mentioned this earlier, like you're really telling a narrative about yourself through your college application. So it looks really good if you have a sort of like shtick that you can focus a lot of your interests around too.
I guess I think you guys all summed it up pretty well. Yeah, like stats and extracurriculars, like all of that, it's really intimidating to think about. But honestly, I think instead of like they've been saying, like trying to think about it in a resume way, I think something that I did freshman year in high school, which definitely I did have, ideas of, okay, I'm gonna do these things, add to my resume. Like for instance, I actually did join speech. I mean, I joined debate and speech freshman year, and largely for resume reasons in the beginning, to be honest. But as I went on, I realized that I actually did not like debate. So sorry to all the debaters, but I didn't like debate. I actually like speech a lot more. So I ended up quitting debate to focus on speech. And I think that I don't think you should keep on, even if you're in an activity and you're like, okay, I want to be consistent and I want to be in this activity and it looks good on my resume. If it's not something that you actually like, that you're actually going to put a lot of effort into purely because you like the activity, it's really not worth pursuing it. And instead, it's a lot more worth pushing your time into activities that you're truly passionate about. And this comes through in your application too, because it's really easy. It's really hard to fake being passionate about certain activities when you're writing your essays and stuff like that. And it's a lot harder to write essays, I think, if you're faking your passion. But it's definitely a lot more worth it. It makes a lot of things easier for you if you're able to kind of focus on the things that you like, even if they're not like traditionally things that would, let's say, add to your resume or people think would look good. Like, even if they're not, as long as you're really passionate about it and you keep on focusing on it, I think in the end, it will work out for you.
I guess kind of for the sake of time, maybe we could jump to the next questions. So I know, Joy, you just mentioned essays. So maybe our panelists kind of want to give insight onto how to approach those and how you kind of like want to write your essays.
I guess I'll start. I think I think kind of a common misconception about essays is you have to find like the most dramatic incident that's ever happened to you in your life, and then you have to write it and make it sound like as dramatic as possible. And that's kind of how I went about it at first. You know, I wrote this like really like dramatic, oh my gosh, like all of these happens. I had like an epiphany and like whatever. But I think you'll find that a lot of times you can take very small moments, like even from a daily life, even from like a day at work or something like that, something that's like not necessarily like, oh my gosh, like the biggest, most like life-changing moment of your life, right? And drawing on that one day, you can kind of reach out and use it like almost as a metaphor to talk about other aspects of your life, like other aspects of your activities or what you do, and then kind of reach into your personality. You don't have to like find this dramatic moment like sometime where somebody has been really bad to you, but you overcame that or something like that. So just like think more in terms of metaphors instead of in terms of traumatic memories, if that makes sense.
Yeah, something I would just add is like the essays are really important because it's the only time other than an interview that you're going to be speaking directly to the admissions officer, basically, because it's like your voice. And so a tip I would give is don't over polish your essay to the point where it's not your voice anymore. I think that's really important. Like it's okay to use essay advising like services or to have your friends read it and your parents and things like that, but don't let them dictate the ideas or specifically the tone that you use. If it's okay if your character comes through in it, and something that I used a lot was I read my essays out loud to see that if they sounded like the way that I interact with people genuinely. So I guess in terms of editing your essay, they should be grammatically correct. I would advise that, but in general, you should focus on the editing process being like, is what's getting across what is closest to what I think and what I want them to know about me.
Yeah, I totally agree with what everyone has said up until this point. One thing I would add is, especially when you're starting out with your essay, I think you should be really clear about what you're trying to tell the admissions officer. Like, what about this story? Like, you know, what is it demonstrating about yourself? Are you trying to show how dedicated you are? Are you trying to show how empathetic you are? Or, you know, like, you know, that type of thing. What is it about your personality or your background that you're trying to get across to the reader? Because in the past, when I've, you know, read and edited a lot of my friends' essays, they tell like a really nice story, a really nice like anecdote, but it's like at the end, it's like, what am I supposed to get out of this, right? So I think Joy mentioned like, yeah, it doesn't have to be the super dramatic incident. I personally wrote about sort of like what it was like growing up in a multicultural household, and sometimes when like that can cause like clashes within the family. And so basically you have your story, and then later on you just have to make sure by the end of the essay you have to wrap it up in a way that shows something about yourself and shows how like capable and sort of mature and how like, you know, how dedicated you are essentially.
I think I'll chime in with one part of the process that I had a lot of trouble with, and that was narrowing down on an idea. And I was always under like the misconception that you have to choose a prompt and then try to find an idea from that. I think you can actually take the opposite approach, especially if you're focusing on the Common App. They give you a list of what 6 or 7 prompts. So I think you should actually write something that you're truly passionate about and that you enjoy writing about, and then you can always find a prompt to sort of fit that essay. There's always an essay, or there's always a prompt that's basically write about anything that you want. So regardless of what you end up writing about, don't worry what the prompt actually is. That being said, once you choose that prompt, you should make sure that you're actually answering it. So I know there was probably a prompt where it asked me to write about someone that's been influential in my life. And while you're supposed to write about that person, the point of that essay is, as Sophie mentioned, you always want to make sure you're coming back to that true point. And the point of that essay is to show up more about you and your growth and maybe how that person affected you. and not necessarily just focus on them. So I think when you're deciding prompts and you're deciding topics, be okay and be open to being vulnerable, and ideas will flow from that.
So the last question about the application process is who should write my letters of recommendation and when should I ask for them?
I would say ask. So definitely check the college's website to make sure that you know what the requirements are. If they need one teacher that has been in sort of like a science or math area, and then one teacher that's been in history or social sciences. So double check that before you start asking. But most importantly, ask people or teachers, mentors, coaches, what have you, people who you trust and who you feel comfortable with writing, and that there's an actual relationship there. I know I've heard stories of applicants who ask some senator or some family connection who they don't really know or haven't really met, to ask them to write a letter of rec, and it doesn't really work out because it'll be a kind of a blanket general statement about you. So I would say first and foremost, ask people with whom you actually have a good relationship, and second, probably ask earlier, definitely earlier rather than later. You don't want to get caught in mid-December having to ask someone for a letter of rec when the application is due in just a few weeks. So I think I asked probably late August, early September, for my 3 teachers. So definitely ask earlier rather than later.
Yep, I definitely agree. I also think it's helpful. It's not required, but it's helpful if you ask teachers for letters of rec in like subjects that you're interested in or like things you want to go into in college. So for me, I asked my English teacher, my Chinese teacher, and my supervisor at my internship. And it's always best to ask in person, but you know, obviously with COVID, that's probably not going to be possible like this year. So I just recommend like writing a really nice email, also attaching a copy of your resume because they will definitely use that for reference when they're writing your letter of rec. So just be polite about it, get it done like early. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess with that, we're going to move on to kind of the second portion of our panel, which is going to be more centered around college life instead of the college application process. So we were wondering, so out of the panelists, like what kind of clubs, activities, or programs are you involved in at your institution? And kind of like maybe you guys can comment on your balance between like those activities in school and kind of your work-life balance there.
I guess I can start. I think the other first years will probably agree with me on this, but since COVID, this year extracurriculars has been really different. Like joining them, like a lot of them are like on hold temporarily and stuff, or like rebuilding because of what's going on. So it's probably not like our experience. Just take it with a grain of salt because it's not exactly going to be the same as probably what you're going to experience. But I'm in a research program, so it's like a part of the Michigan's research program, and I'm also like participating in the student government. So those are like the major activities that I'm involved with. For what I have to say on that, there's a lot of programs in universities that like start applications in the middle of the summer or even before that. So I think something that's important is when you decide to go to school, I think it's important to start looking into these kinds of programs, especially like bigger like living community type programs and stuff like that earlier on, so that you can start applying to them earlier. And even if you like don't know if you want to go or not, just apply, because even if you don't want to go in the end, like at least you apply just in case, you know. So that's what I have to say about it. About balancing this and with your workload, I think something that's very important is I think in college everything becomes really about how much you can time manage. Like you can really pack your schedule like if you manage your time well enough. And using tools is very important. Like this year I've been absolutely devoted to Google Calendar. Like I look at that every single day like at least 10 times. So you have to like kind of schedule out all the things that are happening. Unlike high school, which is you kind of have like a general schedule, like every day you go to school from this time to this time, and then you have like extracurriculars after school on like Tuesdays or Thursdays. It's a lot different in universities. Like a lot of the organizations are a lot more wishy-washy about when they meet and stuff like that, and your classes are definitely not the same schedule. So make sure like from the start of the school year, like you're given a syllabus and everything, that you are scheduling everything out. And I think your ability to organize your schedule has a lot to do with how much you'll be able to do in the end.
I think so. I don't know when everything's gonna go back to normal with COVID, but for my first year at least, we had like a normal college experience, you could call it. Basically, they have this giant thing called Club Fest at my school. It's similar to activities fairs in high schools, but every club sets up a booth or like a place where you can look at what you want to do. And like when I was a freshman, I was like shook at how many clubs there are. Like there's literally something for everyone. The club that I'm involved in is called GMA. It's Global Medical Missions Alliance. And it's basically, it pairs undergraduates who are interested in medical careers and then with Christian healthcare professionals. And then we do missions together. And it basically combines two things I'm interested in, which is like a career in medicine and also my faith, which I'm really passionate about. So it's basically the perfect combination of the two things that kind of make me as a person, right? And it was really easy for me to find. So I think that in college, like the activities that you can find, there's a lot. And if you take initiative to find them, you can find them. And I think that COVID does present a significant barrier to that because like my club activities, a lot of them moved to Zoom, but there are some things you can't do over Zoom, like a mission trip. Like obviously you can't do that over Zoom. But you can still, I think, get involved in some ways. Like I did research at a wet lab my first year and undergraduates aren't allowed into the lab, but I can still do like readings and help postdocs on the side. And so I think I really can't speak to the COVID experience too much, but hoping that by the time you guys go to college, it'll be normal again. My advice is to just take initiative in joining things because there's a lot out there for you.
I can chime in. So it was online and it was much different than what I've heard is normal. But we also had kind of like an activities fair that Rachel mentioned, where we could basically go and hear from ambassadors or whatever you want to call them from the club. And basically, a lot of these clubs that I joined, I'm in a few finance clubs. They have application processes. So just like Joy mentioned, get a head start. Rachel mentioned, take initiative. Basically, put yourself out there and find whatever club or organization that you might be interested in. And a lot of these universities sort of mention that they've got 500 plus organizations. And if you don't find something that you're interested in, find a few friends and you can make whatever club that is. And I would mention for the work-life balance, clubs, I think, are a great way to basically pursue something that you're really interested in. And it shouldn't be it shouldn't be a hardship to go to those. I've often found that those are the places where I find my best friends. That's where I have fun. It's not like a thing where like I'm unhappy to have to go to another meeting after school or after my classes. So I think that's the kind of attitude you want to take when you're trying to find these clubs or organizations as well. And like Joy mentioned, Google Calendar and just time management is really important.
Okay, in your opinion, what are the best parts to college life and how did it feel like trying to adjust to the college environment in the beginning?
Speaking from my experience, having only experienced college from home, I think that what us freshmen this year face or experience is mostly the more challenging parts of college. Like, since we're not on campus, what we have access to is just the academics, the rigors of like being in college and homework and tests. But I think even being at home, I can tell that the best part of the college experience is the people you'll meet. You'll be able to expand your worldview and see how people different from you live their lives or how they think differently based on their experiences growing up. And I think just try to meet as many people as you can. You'll be able to learn something from anyone.
Yeah, I think, in my opinion, the best part of college is definitely the independence. Yeah, college is a blast. Like, I think that's a subjective statement because I know some people struggle with academics and social life because all of those things, they're an adjustment from high school. It's gonna feel different. You basically manage your own time. No one is on your tail to do your homework, and that ends up being either a good thing or a bad thing. Even the professors, like, they're not on you to do your homework because if you don't do it, you're just gonna fail the class. Same with waking up and getting the lectures on time. It's all about what you time manage, right? And what you take the initiative to do. When you're on campus, hopefully someday in the future, it's just really fun to like be with your friends, get coffee, get lunch, study together, have those late nights at like 3 a.m. eating ramen because your prelim or your midterm is the next day and like you're not prepared, but none of you are prepared. So that's why it's fun. I guess your parents might not think that, but it's just a fun time, right? And I think the key to like really maintaining that is like focus on what you I don't want to say what you want to do because some people don't know what they want to study right away. Just be honest about what you want to study and like what you're studying right now. I mean, freshman year, you're just going to be taking like general classes with like 200 people in your lecture hall. Just do your best and care about your mental health. That's a huge thing. It's like, yeah, my GCal is packed all the time, but if I don't care about my mental health, like it all falls apart and I don't have the initiative to want to do anything. So I'm like straying away from the question. College is really fun. And in my opinion, it's fun because you get to dictate what you do with your time.
I just want to chime in really quickly, touching on what Rachel said. So I was only on campus from September through up until Thanksgiving. And I honestly really believe that the freedom is the best part. I know there are some parents on this call, but having that time away where you're an adult now and you just get to live on your own or with friends rather. But I think what Rachel mentioned, getting to dictate what you want to do with your time, and also forming those relationships with other people who are going through that exact same thing is really fun. I only got a COVID version and 3 months of it, but still those like 3 a.m. ping pong games or those movie nights or whatever on the weekends or even before a big exam, I think is what the college experience is all about. And I'm only speaking on a few months, but nonetheless, I think that that time away from home is really valuable.
Okay, so if no one has anything else to say, we can move on to kind of some of the audience questions that were submitted to us in the chat. And so the first one is back in reference to the application process, and it's what mistakes do you think you all have made throughout the application process?
I can start it off. I think the first thing that comes to mind is just applying to way too many schools. I applied to, like, I think I mentioned earlier, I applied to like 19 schools, and that might be like the perfect amount for some people. But for me personally, I like burned out so hard by like January. It was honestly like by the end of the process, like I felt like my essays were like so flat and like they were so lifeless. So my recommendation would be, you know, apply. And also like a lot of the schools I applied to, like I applied to purely because they were like in the top 20 like schools, you know. So I really would recommend like having a really structured tier list so that you have schools that you know you can get into, but you have like some more difficult ones that you might feel more passionate about. And really just like having that balance. Otherwise, you're going to burn out so hard.
Yeah, a mistake I made, and this has more to do with the personal side of it than the like how to get in and how to do everything right. But yeah, I think I compared myself a lot to other people in the process. And it's because all of your friends are seniors, they're all applying to schools. You will naturally compare yourself to the people around you, especially, your friends who get in early. Like it seems so nice because they're done, it's great. The and even before that, like hearing where other people are applying and what their resume is like, it's really easy to feel like you didn't do enough or you're not going to get in. That it's so easier said than done, and I'm saying it because I made that mistake and I still make that mistake in college. But everyone's individual academic journey is different. It's very different, and so what their resume is not what yours is, and for a good reason. And it's because you're two completely different people. The schools they get into are not the schools you get into because you're two completely different people. So don't be discouraged if you didn't get in, or if you don't get in early, and don't be discouraged if you're not applying to the same schools in the same manner. Just be confident in yourself, because at the end of the day, it's like college, getting like the college admission process is kind of like a fake it till you make it thing. Like you might feel like imposter syndrome. Just do it, just apply and be confident. I think that's what I would tell myself if I could talk to my senior year self.
I think I will say, um, be prepared. I don't want to be a downer, but also like be prepared for rejection, because sometimes I I will be candid. It was COVID and I was not so. And when you read those first words like we thank you very much for applying, or we're sorry to tell you, or whatever the nice version of this university's way of telling you that they haven't accepted you, just be prepared for that. And I think probably go into it with the attitude that, if they didn't accept you, that wasn't the place for you, and you're just going to be way better than whatever you could have done at that place. And I think when you sort of take it, it's tough. Don't get me wrong, it's tough, especially with COVID. But I think if you can take that attitude and just kind of keep moving forward, your mental health would probably be a lot better, and you can probably be a lot happier with wherever you end up. So that's what I'll say.
Our next question is, why did you choose your school and what makes your school different than the rest? And what is something about your school that a lot of people don't know about?
I can start. So I go to Northwestern, and I chose Northwestern because of its truly interdisciplinary education. You can explore anything you want, and we're on the quarter system, so that allows you to take more classes. Here you can major and double major, and I don't know if you can triple major, but you can have up to 3 things where it's like 2 majors and a minor, or like whatever you can fit in your schedule. You're free to explore classes across the like 6 or 7 different schools here. So you could take journalism classes or like acting classes, like just being at a school that's kind of, it has um departments in everything. That's really nice to explore different passions. And it would, I thought for me personally, it would allow me to grow more fully as a person instead of purely doing something for pre-med or biology or computer science. I will have a chance to combine my interests and explore what I can do with them together with knowledge from liberal arts and other fields.
I guess for me, I chose Michigan. I think this depends on who you are, but a big part why I chose Michigan is because I'm planning to major in economics, and there's also a very good business school at Michigan, which is called the Ross Business School. So I was looking at that, and I wanted the option open if I ever decided to switch out of economics and do business instead, to be able to go to a business school. And so that's a big part of it. I can also like take classes between the colleges like in my first 2 years, which is also really nice. I think kind of differently. At first I was definitely not planning, like UMich was definitely not where I was planning to go at the beginning of the application season. Like I didn't really think I would want to go to like a huge university. But I think also a different part of it that made me decide to want to go is that there's a lot of programs, there's a lot of living communities and stuff like that that kind of can give you a smaller college, quote unquote, smaller college experience while you are still in the big college. And because it's such a big college, there's like a lot of different types of resources out there to try to accommodate to a lot of different students. So I think just really researching the departments that you're like, especially the departments that you're interested in, and kind of considering like what resources this school has, or like what kind of things the school has in comparison to your other schools. I think that's really important.
Okay, so the next question that we have is, on the first day of college, with the amount of classes you choose to take, how do you adjust between that and extra activities you want to participate in without feeling overwhelmed as compared to high school?
Oh, I really love this question, so I'm going to answer it. Yeah, my number one advice for incoming freshmen is like, do not overwhelm your schedule. Like, this is not high school. I think that's like the classes, sorry, excuse me. Oh my God, my voice. The classes are hard, especially if you're taking rigorous classes. Your time management is not as good as you think it is. Even if you're really good, it's like a little less than what you think it is. So take it easy your first semester. Take a light class load, take what you need to take. But my professor told me this one time, that these freshmen, take so many classes and they have all these different passions, and that's great, but they don't even know how to do laundry on their own yet. They don't know where the dining halls are. They don't know how to get to their lecture hall. They don't know how to take the bus. Like, those things take time to get used to. And like, there's nothing truer than that. Like, you're studying for your chem midterm at the middle of the night and you have like this giant load of laundry, or like the next morning you need to run to, I don't know, you need to run to your lecture hall. You don't have clean socks because you didn't do your laundry, or you didn't eat on time because you kept forgetting to eat. Like, those really basic things that, you kind of did at home, you forget that you need to like actively learn how to do those things in college again. So yeah, my advice is just take it easy your first semester, and then you can start loading up, I think, later, once you understand what your limit is. And everyone has different limits. Like, honestly, I'm a pretty low functioning person. So I have a certain number of credits where I know if I go above this, I'm not going to do well this semester. And the key is to know what your limits are. And yeah, the biggest difference from high school is those little things that you didn't even realize that you didn't know how to do.
Okay, our next question is, what should we focus on most during college, during high school? Extracurriculars or groups, and how should we prioritize?
I think Brittany cut out a little. So the question was, what should we focus on the most during high school, extracurriculars or grades, and how should we prioritize?
I think this is a tough question, purely because I don't know if there's any one thing that you should focus on most. I think it should be prioritize what you feel needs to be prioritized. Of course, there's always like the 75 percentile or 25 percentile GPA and ACT and SAT scores that universities will report. And I think someone said, I think it might have been Amy earlier on, where these kinds of grades and GPA and ACT, SAT things are often looked at as kind of like a benchmark. And I think you definitely need to keep up your grades and whatnot to sort of meet that benchmark. But I don't think stressing over 95% versus a 96% is like, definitely don't take time out of your day to stress over something like that. And when you're focusing on extracurriculars, make sure it's the extracurriculars that you're actually passionate about. And I know a lot of panelists, I think all of them have already been this. Don't just do something for the sake of doing something. And when you focus on extracurriculars, I mentioned this earlier, make sure you're having fun while you're doing that. For example, I participated in hacky sack club. My friends and I, just one day we started hacky sacking. Rachel can attest to this. She saw us doing this many times in the high school. There was no gain out of that except pure joy, and I was perfectly fine with that. And I mentioned that, and I think that adds another layer to who I am as a person and how I look on paper. So don't just do Science Olympiad for the sake of doing Science Olympiad. Actually do it and put time into it because you care.
Yeah, and the next question we have is, can you have multiple passions? What if the clubs you are in are different than the career goal you want to pursue, and would that affect how colleges actually accept you?
I can speak on this. I did a lot of extracurriculars that aren't exactly like what I want to pursue in college. Like, for example, two of the big things on my application were art and music. I like competed for a bunch of awards and like both of them. And that's obviously not political science. I'm not going to be like an artist either, like in college. So I mean, generally like stuff like art, music, typically stuff that like enriches your resume or like just stuff that you're passionate about, it's not a problem to have there. In fact, it's actually very good. And especially if you continue with those activities for a long time, it shows your dedication and it can actually really help you in your application. One thing I will say is like, it won't really make sense if you're like applying to be like a classics major or like anthropology or something, but all of your activities are like STEM based. Like that's just like a little inconsistent. So, I mean, just use your common sense, right?
Yeah, I think a big part for your application is just finding intersections. So like I did all of debate in high school, so everyone thought I was going to do law, but all my applications, I was like, okay, so I did 4 years of debate, but I would like to be a pre-med and I'd like to major in bio. And so honestly, my STEM activities were not very good because I didn't really care about them. I cared about debate. So the way that I navigated that is a lot of the skills are transferable: public speaking, communication, leadership. Like all of those things you need to be a doctor, and all of those things you can use in a bio major. And so I think the key is just finding the intersection, right? And colleges love like interdisciplinary stuff. So you just talk about like, yeah, I did a lot of humanities in high school, but this intersects with a STEM major I wanted to for these reasons. And you need to find those reasons for what you would like to do in college. And it's okay if those things change. You don't have to stick to what you said in your application in college. So just go with what you think you want now.
Okay, our next question is, if my grades were mixed, for example, having some A's and B's during your first year, will that affect your admission?
Absolutely not. I will be incredibly candid. I had some B's my first year. Doesn't matter. I think what's most important when you're looking at grades is that you show growth. If there was, first and foremost, if there was a significant change or a discrepancy and there's a reason for that, I would definitely recommend to explain that, and there's a space to do so on the Common App. But if there's more of like maybe a B plus, an A minus, an A, and just showing that growth, everyone is a human being. I don't think there's any one grade that can basically make or break you. So.
Okay, and the next question we had was, is it easy to switch majors or would it be better to double major? How do classes kind of work in college? Excuse me. How do classes kind of work in college in that regard?
I guess, I mean, we haven't gotten to the stage where probably, I don't think any of us have gotten to the stage where we had to switch majors yet. And I think it depends on your college, but in general, don't worry too much about the switching majors. There's a lot of students, like there's a lot of people out there, like a lot of upperclassmen definitely, who like think they're gonna do this one thing. And then they go from doing like, let's say like they go from doing pre-med to having like a philosophy major. Like it changes very fast. And there's a lot of, I don't think it's too big of a deal to switch majors or double major, especially if the majors had some classes in common in the first place. Obviously, if you're making a very extreme change, like you're gonna have to make up the credits. But if you're, say, like doing economics and you're like, okay, but I found out that I want to do business instead. Like a lot of these classes are interchangeable. Like a lot of these interests, if you just realize that you want to take a different approach, there's a lot of classes that apply to the same majors. So it's not too hard to switch. And even if it is, I think like even if you do end up having to, like you definitely have more time than you think you have. Like you kind of go in thinking, oh, I have to do this much. But then when you look at your credits and how many credits you actually have, you realize you have a lot of wiggle room. So don't worry too much if you end up deciding that you don't like something that you thought you were going to like, or if you want to do a different major instead or do a double major or something like that. You definitely have more time than you think you do to do it.
I think I'll add that it might depend on the school you go to. So make sure to do your research, because at Northwestern you can switch whenever you want to whatever you want, however many times you want. But I know that's not the case for other schools. Like I think I've heard at Berkeley, like the computer science major is incredibly competitive. So you might want to be aware of things like that before you choose a school. Like maybe if you're undecided, choose a school that lets you switch majors more easily. But if you know I'm going to be a computer scientist, like choose a school that's best for that.
Yeah, and some of the bigger schools too, like they have colleges like within the university. So there's like arts and sciences, engineering, business, and things like that. So switching between those colleges is a lot more difficult than switching between majors within the college. So I would, recommend, depending on the university you pick, putting a lot of thought into that. Because like, for example, at my school, like if you're in the College of like Human Ecology, like half of our school is private and half of it is public, like the colleges. So you can't easily switch from like human ecology to, let's say, like hotel administration. Like you can't, it's such a drastic change and you have to apply to that college like in a whole other process. So yeah, I would just echo Amy and say, do your research.
Okay, our next question is, how do you restrain yourself from having too much fun in the activities you enjoy to focus on more on academic goals?
I have not thought about my answer at all, aside from saying I don't know if I really like the term too much fun. I mean, sure, you need to make sure you have a balance, but I think is considering the audience that we've got on this call, you all are likely starting early and starting thinking about this process early, so you're all very responsible. The idea of making sure that you can focus both on your academics and on your extracurriculars is purely just it's time management, and it's I don't know, I suppose making sure that you're being responsible and not going out and partying every night, that's obviously one way to make sure that you're not having too much fun. But I think from the standpoint of having fun in your extracurriculars, I know, for example, my brother, right? He found his best friends in one of his clubs, and they'll meet in the club, but they'll also meet outside of that club to just hang out on Mondays, obviously on Zoom now. But I think when you think about having too much fun in the extracurriculars that you're pursuing, it really depends on the extracurricular, and it just means that you're not really that you spend enough time and sufficient time, but not necessarily too much time that you need to on your classes. And I'll add one piece of advice in saying that one of my mentors, mentor really, he's a buddy that I've been assigned, who's a current sophomore, and he mentioned that if you're trying to decide between maybe spending one more hour of studying for something, for a class, versus 1 hour out with friends, and the benefit from that one more hour studying is pretty much negligible, then just spend that time with friends, especially considering the whole COVID situation and how everything can be really unpredictable. And so I think I wholeheartedly agree with that approach, in that you shouldn't be too stressed either.
I can also add one thing, and it's gonna sound really cheesy and stupid, but like I don't think fun and academics are like mutually exclusive either. I feel like if you really hate the classes that you're in, then I think you need to do some reevaluation of like which classes you've picked. Because honestly, even though like I'm taking classes and like certain things that are not going to contribute to my major, I'm still like enjoying them. I'm able to, like communicate with other students and like talk about really interesting, like in-depth things. And, it's not awful. So I think, really just try to make the most of your experience. And, if you're making the best of your time, then fun and learning should not be exclusive.
Yeah, the next question we have is, how do you plan out your four-year college class schedule so that you don't waste time and money on random classes?
So, yeah, my best advice for this is take advantage of your counselors or your advisors. So, a lot of the times in the college or the major you're in, they're going to assign you to some advisor who's like a professor, or sometimes they do peer advisors. Well, they'll assign you to like a junior or a senior. And then together you can plan out your whole 4 years, or you can plan out the next 2 years. For me specifically, because I'm a pre-med, they gave me like this sheet with like, these are the classes you need to do, right? With like orgo, physics, genetics, all these things, and they tell you what to take. But I think it really depends. If you are in like a new kind of major that's not really been done before, you're inventing your own academic route, then it's going to take more effort on your part to plan that with your advisor. But if you're taking a pretty traditional like engineering pre-med track, a lot of that has already been done before, right, by your upperclassmen. So I would suggest like, talking to upperclassmen, like seniors, juniors, like what did you take your sophomore year? What did you take your junior year? And how did you do that? And then sort of fit in the things that you want. I would say in terms of spending money on random classes, this is actually a good question. So there are a lot of random classes, some of them good and some of them bad. So take advantage of ratemyprofessors.com and your upperclassmen. Look at your professors. Are they good at teaching? Is the material interesting? Or so a lot of the times my upperclassmen will tell me like, oh yeah, this class is really fun and easy, you should take it. So then take it, right? Like have fun in college and do what you want. Like we have a class called human bonding where you basically learn about like how to make friends and how to fall in love. And it's just fun. Like you just take it. But that planning and having fun, there's kind of room for both, and take advantage of advice and be open to hearing other people, because you don't want to go too crazy.
Yeah, and also I can speak specifically for Columbia. So if there's anyone who's interested in applying to Columbia, keep this in mind. Columbia makes a huge deal out of their thing called like the core curriculum, which is essentially like a set of really extensive graduation requirements and like required classes, especially in the humanities if you're applying to Columbia College. So in my case, my school is basically forcing me to take a lot of useless classes useless classes. But I actually think it's a really good opportunity they're basically forcing you to explore things beyond what you think you're already interested in at the moment. And I think especially in the first year, that period of exploring can be really crucial, because especially if you don't know what you want to do yet, this is really your time to sort of like gauge potential interests, also meeting new people, learning new things that you haven't learned before. So I think there is a lot of value in that too.
I think kind of going off of from what Sophie said, like since each school has different requirements, I think something that's really helpful is depending on what college you apply to, there's also some colleges with like smaller colleges inside the college, obviously. So in each of those colleges have different like graduation requirements. I'm not sure if all universities have this, but we have something called like an audit checklist. Basically, it's just like all the types of credits that you need. It's kind of hard to like exactly plan out which classes you're going to take, because classes change from semester to semester. Like they're not the same classes unless they're like the intro level classes, but they're generally not going to be the same classes from semester to semester. So like down the line, after you've like in like 2 years and maybe like, oh, I was planning to take this class, but they're not teaching it anymore. So it's better to get like an idea of, instead of looking at what classes you're taking, look at what credits you're taking, if that makes sense, because certain classes fulfill certain like school requirements and then certain like major requirements, and then making sure like you balance out so that you're not just doing your major requirements or just doing your school requirements, if that makes sense.
All right, just a reminder, if anyone has more questions, to DM Tommy. And the next question is, what's the difference between majors, minors, and concentrations?
Okay, so I think this question, or the answer to this question, can vary school to school. Right, if you go to Harvard, right, in Boston, they have concentrations and not majors, but it's the same thing. But you'll get a Harvard student saying, like, concentrate in economics or something like that, right? But it's effectively the same thing. Majors and minors is there's more of a difference. Majors typically have more course requirements in order to complete that major, and it's something that'll be written on your diploma when you graduate. For example, my major, I'm majoring in computer science and economics, and that has 15 course requirements that I need to complete. And minors typically have fewer course requirements. It can range depending on what the minor is. For example, one thing that I'm looking at is a minor in statistics and data science. And in fact, my college calls them certificates instead of minors. So the terminology can change from school to school, but effectively majors are kind of like the larger thing that you are focusing on, and minors might be like you might have a chunk or smaller chunk of time that you're spending at school learning about that specific subject or subjects. And so, like, one more example, I might have mentioned this, but the statistics and data science certificate has a 5 course requirement to earn that. So it really varies based on course requirement, and in terms of the actual terminology, oftentimes they might mean the same thing, they just use different words.
And kind of in relation to that last question, someone asked, do I have to choose a major, and will choosing undecided affect my admission?
It depends on what you're applying to. So there are some schools that like when you apply to it, like I'm just going to use University of Michigan as an example since I understand it the best. But like we have different colleges within the university, right? So if you wanted to apply to the Ross Business School, but you're undecided and you don't know if you want to do business, that's probably not going to look the best, but if you're applying to the general like school of liberal arts, you can choose undecided. So it really depends on what you're looking to apply to. like if you're applying to specific technology, like schools relating to like computer science or things like that, you definitely want to have a major there. But if you're doing a more general liberal arts degree, like I think in general, if you're doing a liberal arts type degree, it's okay to put undecided. But I think when doing STEM related degrees like engineering or like business or something like that, I think you want to be more careful, especially like depending on what school you do. Like you definitely don't have to say the same thing for all of your applications either. I think that's something to keep in mind. You can say, I want to do business for this certain school, but then you can say undecided when you're applying to a different one. Like these colleges aren't going to know like that you said something else on what you're intending your major to be when you're applying to a different school. So make sure you do your research on what your college is and like what the programs are that you want to get into.
Okay, the next question is, how do you find internship opportunities during freshman and sophomore years, especially during the pandemic?
So I think there are different avenues for finding internships or summer programs. Some of them involve like talking to your professors. So if your professor or TAs have office hours, you go and you talk to them and you kind of discover what kind of work they're doing, I guess, on the side, and like if you can get involved in that. You can also, where I get a lot of my information is like mailing lists. So I'm on like different mailing lists for like science classes, or like for arts and sciences, like my college, they send out emails weekly with like internship opportunities, and it's like very straightforward. It's like these internships are hiring, and you can also go to networking events. Um, I know at least for my school, a lot of them have been happening still online. Like it used to happen in like big like gyms or like lecture halls where they would have like donuts and coffee and stuff, but now it's just over Zoom, and it might be a little bit more awkward, but you get the same opportunities, right, to talk to these people and network. If you're a freshman or a sophomore, you can also, depending on the types of clubs you're involved in, so sororities and fraternities, especially the professional ones, they will connect you with professionals. They'll connect you with alumni who like know what they're doing and who can get you those internships too. Sometimes the clubs you're involved in can also be pre-professional, so those will connect you. So you can kind of go in cold with like, if someone sent out a mass email with those opportunities, or you can network and get people that you know and like get in that. And that's really different depending on what you're doing. Like business, people who are interested in business, like you guys can talk about it separately because I have no idea how that works. But like I know for pre-med opportunities like research, it's a lot of just emailing professors and getting to know yeah, what's out there, and really putting yourself out there.
And next, someone asked, should I apply for scholarships? And if so, how?
Short answer, yes. College is very expensive and highly recommend getting free money wherever you can. How? I think for me, it was just a lot of Google searching, and just using different websites that have kind of just like a list of all of these different kinds of scholarships that you can apply to. And I think right now, like despite all the detriments and drawbacks of COVID, one really great thing that comes from it is that you might find yourself having a lot more time, and with that, you can spend that time submitting applications to a bunch of different kinds of scholarships. Even if it's $100 or $500, those can add up, and it can really help out when it comes to paying for college. In fact, some universities also, you might qualify for a scholarship based on your credentials, or based on your background at that university. So I know some of these places like Vanderbilt or Duke, UNC, they might have like a scholarship deadline. And so if you apply to the university by that deadline, then you will also be under consideration for that scholarship, and that can help out a lot. So not only can you look at for scholarships from third-party websites, but you can also look at the universities that you might want to go to.
Moving on, someone asked, do you guys have any other pieces of time management?
I guess I'll start, but I think it depends on person to person, but I think the best thing is to think about time management not as trying to cram as many things in as possible, but rather how to schedule out your break, or like taking breaks versus like balancing your studying. So I guess like a big piece of advice from me is to not schedule like a whole day or whole evening or whole like day just devoted to studying or chunks. I think it's always nice to like reserve yourself like 1 or 2 hours in a day. Like you could do whatever you want, like just free time or whatever. Don't like feel too pressured to like make sure you have the perfect schedule. Don't like feel like competitive to show other people like your Google Calendar, how filled mine is versus yours. It's really not about that. I think something for me, I don't know if it will apply to you guys during the pandemic, depends on how things pan out, I suppose, is that something that's really nice for time management, as in like doing your homework or like structuring a time to do work, especially now that everything is like so like on your own time, is reaching out and making study groups with other students in your classes. That's also a good way to connect to them. Generally classes have like huge group chats or like stuff like that, and you can kind of just post in there, like don't be afraid, like there's so many people that are just scrolling through waiting for somebody to ask to like make a study group or something. Just send a post saying, oh hey, I'm interested in making a study group, like would anybody be interested in joining? And I assure you, you'll get a lot of people responding. So don't be afraid to reach out and like do this, and then structure time to meet like every single week, and then just get your homework done during that time. I think that's for me a really good way of like other people holding you accountable to it, and also making friends along the way.
My biggest advice for time management would be not to sponsor like GCal. We're not sponsored, but yeah, GCal's good. Like just remembering what you need to do. Cause like I feel like first week of college, I would just have all these meetings and I would forget about them because I didn't write them down anywhere. So yeah, having GCal or literally a physical scheduling calendar book, very convenient. Another piece of advice is go to office hours. Oh my gosh, go to office hours. Like talk to your professors and your TAs, because what can take you 3 hours to understand on your own can take 10 minutes if you just are brave enough to ask your professor a question. It took me a long time to learn this, but once you get in the habit of not just studying, but effective studying, you can take like 3 hours of study time and put it into like an hour where you're actually learning and then applying those skills effectively for an exam. Do that. And then also don't forget to eat meals on time and sleep regularly. People in college say all the time, like sleep is overrated. Actually, if you sleep properly, I mean, I'm not really one to talk, but if you sleep properly, then yeah, what can take you 1 hour on normal sleep could take you like 5 hours because your brain's not working properly. So I feel like those are kind of the principles of college life that are going to undergird any effective time management.
Yeah, so we're kind of nearing the last 5 minutes of today's panel. So does anyone have any last questions before we kind of wrap up here? And you guys can like feel free to chime in, I guess. And just unmute yourselves. Okay, sounds good. So before we ended, I just wanted to kind of plug the PayPal link in the chat. So I'll post that again. And so Again, this is for the Super Joey Foundation, which is a super meaningful foundation here in Minnesota. And we're donating money to families who are affected by childhood cancer. So if you want to thank any of the panelists here today, make sure that you check out the link and donate there. Also, I just wanted to personally thank all the panelists for showing up and coming here to today's panel and sharing their experiences about college admissions and college life. So yeah. Does anyone have any last remarks?